So the deal on 14C, this is on test 1A, right? This is fall of 21. Anyway, so on 14C, what it's talking about is the how we get sound waves. You have to manipulate air molecules, the medium between my mouth and your ear. So the idea was with Thomas Young's experiment in 1800, double slit showed that light is like a wave. So the thinking was, the misconception was in the 1800s that light and sound waves both required a medium. So the ether, which Newton had proposed back in 1718, it was almost like this is more proof that there must be some material between the sun and the earth in order for the light waves to get to us. Like there has to be air for sound waves to get to us. And that's why I had you do 14B and 14A to kind of set the scene. And then you get to 14C, where now they're trying to find this ether, this made-up ether, that will act as a ultimate reference point, a grid system sort of, also as a way for light to, Newton called it the luminous ether, for light to manipulate to get all that electromagnetic wave from the sun to the earth. So, yeah, sorry, it's getting late. So then Michelson-Morley experiment was to show evidence of the ether, and that's why they did there's videos in the comments underneath that day we talked about this, or a couple of days we talked about this. But the idea was they could detect through interferometer in Ohio there in the basement. This is the most expensive experiment they ever did. They could detect ether wind, and one thing I didn't talk about in class, but they did it 6 months apart. One where the Earth's going this way around the sun, one's going the other way, and then you should be able to detect a difference because the Earth's going like 65,000 miles an hour. So you should detect a difference depending which way you're going. And no matter what they did, the interferometer, as we talked about, breaks up the beams, and they got to come back together. One goes perpendicular to the other one. They should interfere with each other if they're not in sync, and they shouldn't be in sync because it's going with the ether and going against the ether. So in one direction is going with the ether, 6 months later going against the ether. So all the stuff we talked about in class and the videos talk about it as well. But the main thing I want you to say on 14C is when they found that no matter what they did, it didn't manipulate this ether. And so, I mean, this light always came back and constructively interfered with itself. So there was no evidence of any ether, no matter how many times they did it. So that's like one of the big differences between electromagnetic waves and sound waves is sound waves need a medium, they need air in the room. But electromagnetic waves don't. They go in a vacuum, which really blew everybody's mind. And it's kind of set the stage for relativity about 30 years later, or more like 20 years later. So this is a very important experiment. It's considered the biggest failure ever, but it actually was important to show that light moves in a vacuum, and there is no ultimate reference point. So that's the idea, is that that you need to say, and write that out. You can't write everything I just said, but somehow in 30 words in a drawing, you might show the wave, or show a light wave versus a sound wave. So electromagnetism, like as I've heard it referred to as, the magnetism stitches a little bit of electricity, which stitches a little bit of magnetism, which stitches a little bit of electricity. So it kind of brings its own little factory with it as it is formed. Photons are the carriers, whereas for sound it's pulse waves. Air is the carrier, but for light it's photons that is the force carrier. So photons don't require any kind of medium. All right, so that's the idea.